What's up out there, friends, and thanks again for joining us here on Expanded Perspectives with me, Cam Hale, and of course, as always, in studio with me, we've been laughing for the last 20 minutes straight, Mr. Kyle Filson.
How's it going, everybody? Yeah, I've been in here trying to get a little work done, and sometimes before we turn the mics on, we get to having such a good time laughing and stuff that we might be in here for 45 minutes before we actually do any work.
That's exactly what just happened.
Yeah, we were doing an ad for Parcast, and some of the lines I wrote for the ad, Cam started singing and turning into who sings that? Tiffany? Is that who sings that song?
I think that's who sings that song.
Or is that like a Debbie Gibson?
It can be.
It's one of those girls that was like a one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
And the song is I Think We're Alone Now.
Yeah.
And Cam was...
Kyle's trying to get real serious, and here we go. We're trying to make it right for him.
Because the first part of the ad is like, are we alone?
Are we alone now?
Do aliens really exist?
So, are they flying around? Yeah. And I mean, it's just going on, see? And he lost it the first time. And then I got more carried away with Roswell and all this stuff. So,
and yeah. So now... It's like one of those TV shows where you see them trying to film somebody trying to do something. Now it's stuck in my head. So every time I see the words, all I can think of is, are we alone now?
Do aliens really exist? Are they probing around?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that kind of stuff gets stuck in your head.
Yeah, it took like 15 takes to finally get it.
Now my head hurts. My face hurts from laughing.
My ears actually start because of lack of blood, they start hurting because of laughing too hard.
Like my temples, and I've been slamming Topo Chico in here, getting wild.
Oh, man.
So how's everybody been? Hope you've been wonderful. We're having a great week so far. Like we said on the past Elite show, it was chilly. It's still chilly. We love it. But I'm ready for it to get a little bit so we can get outside, get a little bit weather, better in our favor stuff so we can get outside and do some more things. But yeah, we've had some really interesting emails from all of you. Thank you so much to all of you that have sent it, all the messages. Also notice that I'm really glad you like some of the funny Bigfoot stuff that's been posted on Instagram. We are doing... I think I'm going to do some more photos and stuff to put up on Instagram of like crazy stuff where we were photoshopping and things like that. We've also got a few emails to where we are going out in the next couple of, I would say in the next 45 days or so. Not far from us, there was a few alleged hominid sightings, so we may actually drive out, walk around, look around, take some pictures, see what we can do. We got a game camera. We may throw a game camera up on a trail.
That'd
just
be
to
cool.
See what's
we should
going
take
on.
Our GoPros and do some actual video too.
Yeah, we'll go out there, monkey around and whatnot, and see. No pun intended. Go out there and Wood Ape around, see what we can scare up, what we can find out. But nothing else will be fun.
Now, this is a location that had some activity on it a couple years ago.
Yes.
Now, I don't remember if we actually talked about the incident, or if we mentioned that we were going to, and then just never got around to it.
I don't remember.
But there's been not only strange footprints, strange sounds, but there's actually the disappearance of a few animals.
Yes.
In a very bizarre way. So like well, I don't know if you want to get into it, but
I'll tell you I'll get real fast. The person that took us out there harvested a large boar, a large male hog that was out there.
Feral hog.
Feral.
Not like a farm pig.
No. This is one of those big nasty ones. Shot it with a 7mm Magnum rifle, large caliber deer rifle, and smoked it. I mean, smoked it. Well, he gets up there on it, and he's like, I'm not doing anything with this pig. I'm not going to eat this pig. I'm not going to, because they're not noticed. They're not recognized as game animals in the state of Texas. They're more of a nuisance. So he's like, I'm not messing with him. I wanted him out. It's just a lone boar. When the boars get so big, of course, they're solo, so they don't do anything with them, and they get pretty rank.
Yeah, they're not really good eating.
You can, but yeah, it's hit or miss. It's a 50-50 coin toss how they're going to turn out. So he hooks onto this pig with his four-wheeler and drags this thing, man, probably a half mile or better,
right,
in the far back area of their property in this big gully, this big wash back here. Leaves it. Well, a few days later, some friend, a family member that's on this hunting area with them says, hey, I want to see this pig. Calls him up, says, hey, where's it at? He tells the family member where the pig is. He drives to see the pig. The family member calls, says, hey, look, the pig ain't there. And he's like, well, it's got to be there because it's dead. And he's like, no. He's like, well, maybe something got it. And he's like, no, man, what I'm telling you is I'm not seeing anything. Like, this pig has vanished. So the person that shot the pig goes back, returns to the place, returns to where he left the pig, and said pig is vanished like smoke, like ash in the air. There is no sign on the ground. And the reason I can say all this is because Kyle and I went there.
Yeah.
There is no sign of predation. There was no hair. There was no blood. There was no tracks. It literally looked like something picked this pig up and walked off with it, or floated the pig away. Like there's no footprints. There's nothing.
There's no tracks. Now, if coyotes would have gotten into it, there would be sign everywhere.
A predator eats it, and we may have talked about this before on the show.
Vultures, buzzards. Yeah, there's always
They
sign.
don't remove it. A predator doesn't remove what they're eating as a scavenging animal. They don't carry it off. They eat what's sitting right there.
And from the time the animal was shot to the time me and Cam went there was like 3 days. And
No, it was a week.
Was it week?
It was a week. It was a week because it was killed one time, and then it was a few days later, and then that's when the family member found it, and then we went back like a week from the day it was killed.
That's right.
But they was still, and
but
then
even
we
7 days
searching.
later, there was no sign, no bones, no hair,
no nothing.
Nothing.
We spent 2 hours just tracking down regular trails, making circles, going there all through there, just looking around just in that area of where it was at, and couldn't find anything. Couldn't find hair, blood, not like it got drug away. And like we said, there's no large cats in Texas that's going to pick up a pig this size. So that's not the only thing. There was also some footprints found near a spring that looked like bare feet. Large bare feet made
Not
in
bear
the
like
water.
B-E-A-R.
Yeah.
Like B-A-R-E.
Exactly. Like a barefoot person or a barefoot hominid had stepped in the spring enough to where when the water, of course it's clear, but where the mud was, as the water moved, you could see the outline of a bare foot. So.
And when Cam says there's not large cats in Texas that could carry it, he doesn't mean like a mountain lion dragging it off. I'm talking about picking it up where not a single part of it touched the ground.
We're talking about like a lion or a tiger. Exactly.
Yeah. So something's going on. Bizarre.
Yeah, and that's not the only pig that went missing. There was another one went missing not long after that. Same thing. A person had shot one. There was also, they've had the remains of like their gut piles and things that you would normally would be scavenged. You would find scavenged by predators. So we know the predators are there. They're scavenging on one thing, but they're not scavenging on something else. So there's something was going on. So this has been off and on for quite some time. And then now we're going to go back out, do some more looking into it.
Another thing I'll bring up is in the area in the past, there have been reports of cattle mutilations.
Yes.
And of crazy black helicopters. I'm not saying that all the events are tied together, but there have been strange things that have happened in that area. And that's from a couple different witnesses.
It's less than an hour from where we sit right now. So we're going to check it out, see what happens. Let's see what shakes loose.
Let's see what happens. But before we do that, let's get into the news. There's an interesting article posted over on Phantoms and Monsters about a couple that thinks they may have encountered, get this, a werewolf.
Yes.
This happened just the other day. And they said, the person writes in and says, we went hiking to this spot in Southern California where we've been going for at least the last 13 years. The hiking trails are basically located all along the cliff. Some trails lead to a secluded beach. Others lead to a cave. We took the trail that leads to the beach, and we usually keep walking longer than the average person since we are more familiar with the terrain after the trail ends. Now, around 4:30 p.m., we decided to hike back up the trail while watching the beautiful sunset. At the same time, the moon was rising on the opposite direction. The moon was huge, probably one of the biggest moons I've ever seen. This is where we took some of the pictures. We decided once we got back to the top of the trail around 5:30ish to keep hiking along some other trail, which we've only been once. The night was still young, and plenty of families were walking along the trails. I decided to take a quick break after a short jog to enjoy the scenery and appreciate the beautiful moon. At this time, my husband and son were pretty far from me, and all I could see was their silhouette. The night was now upon us, and the fog from the Pacific Ocean was making its way up the cliff into the hiking trails. My husband and son decided to turn back and meet me because it was getting darker. My son began to run past us. At this point, my husband looks towards his direction and sees this black silhouette of a tall person standing about 9 meters from my son. As soon as this thing notices that my husband is looking at it, it got on all fours and took off like an animal. He yells for my son to come back. He then tells me what he saw and says something is running across the trail. I'm scared of dogs, so the first thing I thought was a stray dog was running loose. He said, no, it's much bigger than a dog. almost like the size of a bear, but it had the silhouette of a man standing in the middle of the trail, and it took off on all fours as soon as I looked at it. He said this thing was darker than the dark around us. At this point, we were freaking out. We were hugging each other close, not knowing what to expect next. We basically were in the middle of a trail we've only been on once, with lousy phone service. We looked around, and the trail was completely empty with no one to be seen. We were basically the only ones there. That trail went from being packed with people to now just the three of us being the only ones there within minutes, which made everything even more terrifying. So we decided to suck it up and walk back to our car, which meant we had to pass by where my husband saw this thing on the trail. My husband said that he thought he saw this humanoid run down the trail, but once we got to that spot where he saw it, the trail turned right, but the figure went left. And to the left was a fence and a bunch of tall bushes, making it impossible for something to go that way. Whatever it was would have had to have jumped the fence to keep going the way it went. We never saw or heard it jump the fence, and better yet, we didn't even hear its footsteps or anything moving in the bushes. My husband said that it must have just disappeared. Now, we managed to keep walking along the trail while holding his phone flashlight pointed at the fence and bushes where he saw it go. All I had was my water bottle, and I was ready to use it as a weapon. All we could hope for at this time was to see other people along the trail. Then, we finally saw these lights coming from a motorbike towards the end of the trail. The person was going into the trail as we were relieved to be heading out and into the parking lot. When we finally got to the parking lot, it went from 50 cars to only 2 cars left. There was this couple outside taking pictures. At this point, even the person on the motorbike, I guess, changed his mind, turned around and came back to the parking lot and then left. As we made our way back to our car, I kind of joked with my husband how he might have just seen a werewolf. He was still in shock and didn't say no, but I think he was still trying to process what he saw. My son said he had saw something crawling around, and that's when my husband called to him to come back towards us. He was really scared that night and refused to sleep by himself. We all slept in the same room. My son said he felt like it was following us the whole time home. I hope not. Today we ended up watching this segment on the news by accident while having dinner, and we heard that today is a super blood wolf moon. Now, I'm 90% convinced we saw a werewolf. So what do you think of that?
Super moon.
Yeah, I remember that. I took pictures of it and actually put it out on Instagram. Yeah. Pretty cool thing. But something large and dark. It morphed down to all fours and ran off. I mean, I don't know how to explain that.
Yeah, Dogman.
Terrifying.
The super wolf blood moon.
Yeah, the super blood wolf moon.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that means.
That sounds like
a cool name.
Some sort of anime show.
Sounds like a band. Yeah. Sounds like something like Lyle Blackburn would be the front man for, or something like that. Or at least the name of a song.
Oh, yeah. Need to ask. I bet Lyle's got one. I need to
Ghoul Town. I don't think most people realize that Lyle Blackburn, the cryptozoologist and author and researcher and narrator of small town monsters documentaries, is also a legit rock star.
Yeah, legit rock star.
Like Ghoul Town is a good band.
And they've been around the world multiple times.
Oh, yeah. They still do shows.
How wild is that? Yeah, I think they just did one like last weekend.
He brought me all the CDs.
Oh, yeah. He didn't bring them. We got them. We were going to steal them, and he gave them to us. We were at the house. You remember we were like, hey, what do you got? And he had all the merch that we were like, if he ain't looking, put them in your pocket. And he's like, oh, you can have some.
I'm trying to think of the name of that song, but it's something kind of like Super Blood Wolf Moon or something.
Under the Phantom Moon.
That's it, Phantom Moon.
That's it. Yeah, I love
search
that
him up on iTunes. It's legit.
We played it on the very first time he ever was on the show. That's what we brought in with him doing the interview. Is we played it with him. Yeah.
Well, and that would have been almost when we found out that he was a rock star. Because in the beginning I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, I would have hit him up to use some of his music for an intro song, right?
We need to look into it. I bet because he's got more. We need to go through a bunch of them.
He can write it for us.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, this jumped out at me. This is from Phantoms and Monsters, and this jumped out at me instantly, and I found another one that links to it too because of what I'm going to be talking about today. But this was a sighting that Lon got called on January 27th of this year. He said he received this this would have been 2:07 Central Time, but it was on Sunday afternoon. about a Bigfoot that was spotted and photographed near Trinity, Texas, from a fella named that he's calling SB. Now, for those of you unaware, that Trinity, Texas is northeast of Houston, so it's right near the Davy Crockett National Forest. And so we're getting over in that area of where there was a ton of sightings of large hairy hominids in the East Texas area. But this is what Lon talks about here. He says this, that SB stated that he and a companion were at a local pond scouting for a future hunting location. Says that the area is well known for upland game. The area around the pond's very marshy with a thick mesquite stand surrounding the opposite side. And he goes on to say that as the pair of hunters walked towards the pond, SB noticed movement in the trees. A 7 to 8 foot hairy being stepped out from behind a large tree and began to sway back and forth approximately 40 yards away. Now, it says here that the being seemed to be taunting the observers, though there was no sound. Now, SB said that it had a very broad body and that the hair color blended in with the mesquite trees. Says that he and his companion realized that they didn't have their phones with them, so they immediately went back to their truck. And while in the truck, SB searched Google in order to make a report and then contacted me. He told me that he had seen the Bigfoot only 20 minutes earlier and that they were going to go back towards the woods. And I asked him to stay in contact. He says approximately 10 minutes later, SB called back and stated that they had gotten within 30 paces, because he later stepped off the distance, of said Bigfoot. And he was very excited and said that his companion had gone further into the woods to try to get a photograph. 15 minutes later, I received the unretouched photo, and he's got it posted. If you go to Phantoms and Monsters and look this up, you'll see the picture. It says that SB called and said that this was the clearest photo that they could obtain at a distance of 50 yards or so. And he said that they were surprised that they had these multiple encounters because the area was often used for hunting, and that they had not heard of any previous sightings of Bigfoot, but that they planned on continuing observing this area, trying to see if they could gather more evidence. So Lon was reached out to a dude that just saw it, went back, and then went back out and looked again. So I did a little digging around, and I got on woodape.org, which the Wood Ape and the Nonwhack and all that's our buddy Mike Mays. Okay, there is a sighting that took place, and this is what this took place. It says occurred on November 24th of 2004. And it says it was a lengthy encounter in the Davy Crockett National Forest. Now, this is what it said here. It happened around 8 a.m., partly cloudy and a clear day that was cool. It said it was swampy, open areas surrounded by palmetto flats in the Alabama Creek Wildlife Management Area of the Davy Crockett National Forest. Now, this is what was said. I was deer hunting that morning. I had gotten situated in my climbing tree stand overlooking the grassy area adjacent to the Mayhaw Pond, and I was near a slough off the Natchez River. I had been on stand since around 5 that morning. Several hogs were in the shorter grass rooting around when the largest sow spooked and they all ran off towards the woods. I then saw a large man, I thought, walking slowly, looking around. I saw, he said, that it was covered in a brownish fur and that it was a male, obviously, because I studied it through my binoculars. He said he's got a pair of 12 by 50 Bushnells, and he said this thing was only 25 to 30 yards away. So he can clearly see what he's looking at through those binoculars. He says he kept looking behind him and pausing. I judged him to be approximately 8.5 to 9 feet tall, extremely broad-shouldered, thick, muscular body, smooth stride. Goes on to say that then another smaller one followed. I assumed this one to be a female since she had pronounced breasts and no indication of male genitals as the larger one had. She stood around 6 to 7 feet tall. So he's got him an eye full of Bigfoot genitalia with his Bushnells. All right, now listen.
I love how the people always write in that we're not pronouncing stuff correctly. They don't get that you're doing it on purpose.
Here we go. The height was judged by the trees that they were standing next to. Said I could hear, now this is, you'll like this, Philly. I could hear soft mutterings and whistlings coming from them as they would look at each other. They were turning over fallen limbs and eating something from under them. They also ate leaves off several of the trees around them. She had blondish, light brown hair, rather short in length, yet was strongly built. I watched them for about 30 minutes before they got out of sight. I waited about another half hour before climbing down. I went to check out the site and found tracks and noticed an odor that was stronger than that of the hogs. It seemed more of a musky scent, not entirely unpleasant as the hog scent. Says I wear a size 13 triple E, and the larger male had feet half again as big as my own. The female didn't seem to leave any pronounced tracks, although they were visible. I'm 6'2" tall, and his stride was almost double that of mine. I have not talked about this to anyone since that day and simply wanted to share it with someone who may appreciate it. I've hunted those woods most of my life, fished the river, and camped. I have heard many strange sounds in those bottoms, but this is the first time I've ever seen anything like this. It was almost spiritual in some way. They seemed to be gentle creatures and very vocal with each other. I hope that they live happily and are not discovered by some of the boys who would frequent the woods these days. They are likely to try to kill one as they look at the sighting as a gift from nature, as how I look at it, and to be appreciated. Now they go on to, like he says, he talks about what he heard, some howling, some sounds. This is what I like. He said that he heard these screaming howls, but it wasn't a dog and it wasn't like a coyote sound. And he goes through all this. He talks about this musky, rather pleasant odor, which always makes me think of beaver castor.
Yeah. I know what
so
you're
it's
talking
one of those sweet smells. It's not a bad smell. It just lets you know that that's there. So Mike Hall was the investigator for Nawak and the Wood Apes that went and checked this out. So he actually went here and he says this. Mike says, I extensively interviewed this witness in the process, questioning him on every detail about this extraordinary and in-depth report. Now, I'm going to tell you what he drew from all this. This guy, he says, the witness told me that he darn sure wanted no one to know about the event and that he would not even told his wife or family about it because he thinks that they'd make fun of him or just simply not believe him. Now, Mike goes on to say that I could discern nothing to indicate that the witness was fabricating the event or that he did not earnestly believe that the event actually happened. He certainly conveyed to me a deep conviction that the event transpired exactly as he portrayed it. The witness meticulously described the two subjects that he reported and watched that day, even mentioning that he was able to see genitalia and was thus able to distinguish the genders of each. The witness claimed that he had a long time, approximately 30 minutes, to observe the two subjects while he was in the tree stand and was upwind. So I'm assuming that maybe what they mean is and was upwind was that he was the subjects were upwind of him. He was actually downwind of what it was. So they didn't even know he was there. And he goes on to talk about these size. And he also says that the witness says that the female had human-like breasts in view, like said they were easily done, and talks about that the hair covered the entire body except around the face, hands, and on the breasts. Now, the funny thing, too, is he talks about with the male is he said that the hair had a sheen to it, that it was shaggy and was dark. So it sounds like a dog hair. It has that little bit of that shine to it.
I agree, yeah.
So that's what it sounds like. He goes in depth talking about all the stuff that he had asked this guy, all the questions, like he's trying to get him to trip up. Now, this is something really interesting, too. It says the witness told me that he considered at one time during the encounter to yell at the subjects in order to prompt some sort of response from them, curious about what they might do. However, his impression was that the pair was a mating couple, so he decided not to harass them in any way. So he talks about this stuff, and he goes into what he believes that the witness and the things that he believes without a doubt what the witness had seen. Now, what's really interesting to me is what the witness said, and then what Mike even goes into too, is he didn't want to tell anybody because also he doesn't want them harassed.
Yeah.
So it's almost like when you have those encounters, like you and I've discussed multiple times, people get caught up in the encounter like, I'm seeing something. First of all, that I didn't even think was a real thing. Like it's one thing to say you believe. It's a whole nother thing to have what you believe standing in front of you.
Yeah.
It's one thing to claim you have faith in something or belief in something until that's put to the test. And when you have this in front of you put to the test, it's a whole different feeling that you don't even know how to, I mean, it's almost like you go into shock, you know, It's like the first time anybody ever sees, if you've never walked up or found the dead body, it's not something but it's the first time that ever happens. If you've ever been involved in that, you're like, the first time was like, this is really strange. You know, this is an odd thing. It's almost along those lines. The guy sees the first one, 30 yards is not far.
No.
That's not far at all. So he's watching it through his binoculars. So at least he took the time to draw in every detail of everything, which goes back into lots of hunters are that way. They're very detail oriented in the sounds, the smells, the movement, the tracks. He's trying to take in everything without really realizing what he had done. And the fact that he goes on to say that he'd been hunting in this area since he was 18 years old. And it's the first time he'd seen anything like this.
Yeah, right. It's stories like that for whatever reason, they seem to hold more weight to me because I'm like, this is a guy that he knows what he's looking at.
Yeah, yeah.
He's not a city slicker.
No,
He's been in this area. He's familiar with it.
This is almost like his backyard. This is places that he spends a ton of time and has the same as we got with the Glimmer Man stories, which we've got a bunch more of those to share. Things like that where people have been in the woods. And even if you hike or you camp or you fish, just in the outdoors in these areas all the time, when you have something like this happens, you can those people have a little bit more than just driving down the road and seeing it. Like you see one, you don't know what you've seen. I get that. But when you got a guy that has this kind of interaction with it and he's like, dude, I don't know what I saw, but I'm not telling anybody.
Right.
Because I don't want, like he even was telling Mike, he's like, you know, they know where it's at. He gives it exactly where it was at, but he's like, you know, because he tells where he was on the other side of this little pond, all this stuff. So they know where the area is.
Right.
You know, but he's like, I don't know, man. I just hope nothing happens to them. He's like, I hope they live happily, you know, after this whole thing. So let's take a quick break. When we get back, there's a few more Bigfoot stories that I want to touch on that Dr. Stepich had sent me. And then it built on this and it grew to this. And there's some stuff I'm talking from the 1700s that I want to get into about some of this stuff. So when we jump back, we'll talk about some more crazy Southern Bigfoot stuff. You're listening to Expanded Perspective.
And we're back with Expanded Perspectives.
Word.
Yeah, man, the stories about Sasquatch and things like that, man, I've talked about it numerous times. There's some days where I'm totally into it, and there's other days where I'm like, man, it can't exist. If it existed, why don't we find anything? But then every once in a while, like that one story with the guy that spent a lifetime in the woods, he sees something. I've met people I know who are lifetime hunters, and they've seen stuff. Even some of them have quit hunting because of it. Some of them continue to hunt, but they're just like, man, I swear to God, I don't know what I saw. But it wasn't a bear. It wasn't a bear.
Yeah, I can't leave it alone, man.
I can't either.
I think it's because
it's the world's most famous cryptid.
Well, it's not just that. I love the outdoors so much that it's just one of those things that, look, it's the same way I am with bear or any sort of, there for a while. I'm not so good now, but I had every game species memorized in Africa. I had all of them in North America.
It was the scientific names, like Antilocarpe americana or something. Yeah,
yes. I had all of this stuff where I could, and of course it served me no purpose other than to try to impress your friends, you know, when you were younger and whatnot. But it was one of those deals. Like I love the outdoors and I love these animals so much that I get drawn into, like I'm reading the book right now that Dan, what is his name? I forgot it now, that wrote about the coyotes. So I'm listening to that whole thing. It's a whole book on about the history of the American coyote or just the coyote. So it goes through all this. So to me, Bigfoot is no different. It's something that I don't know if it's real or not. Like you said, one day I'll wake up and it's real. And the next day I wake up and there's no way it's real. And it's an internal debate that I will probably never, unless somebody brings a body in or unless I have an experience, I will probably never have that connection to where I just know without a doubt.
Do you think there's subspecies, like the skunk ape is completely different than, say, a Sasquatch up in British Columbia, or Almosti, or Orang Pandek?
The coyote book I'm talking about is Dan Flores. While you were talking,
okay, yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Because to me, it would make sense, right? Because just like any other animal,
I like to believe they are.
They're a white-tailed deer from Texas and you take a white-tailed deer from Kansas, there's going to be a huge difference. Or Coues deer, or
Well,
blacktail.
It's like you said, a coos deer compared to a whitetail is like a subspecies.
Very similar, though. Very similar.
And some will argue it's the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But like mule deer. Mule deer sprang up. I mean, it's just not like they've been around for as long as whitetail. I mean, this mule deer is a whole, and they probably won't be around forever either. It's just they're some sort of unique subspecies or, of whitetail. But yes, I like to believe that there are different species of the Bigfoot. Like, depending on where they're at, they have maybe a subtle difference, not just in size, but in hair thickness, hair pattern.
The colors. We've heard of white ones.
Yes.
So
like a bear.
Is that, I was going to say,
is that different in bears?
Is that a case of like something being albino, or is it like a winter fox, how they have white fur?
Well, it would be an adaptation if they were in the snow all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, like a polar bear. That's why the Yeti you would think would be white. But I don't know, man. And it's one of those things like you can go on and on and on, but it's something, it might be, like, we always talk about. And what got me on all this whole thing was what you had covered in the news story that we had discussed too on the Elite Show when we talked about the missing boy, that have just sprang up, and him talking about a bear keeping him safe for 2 days while he was missing, and the distance that they've covered, and all of this stuff. It's one of those. I don't know, but I love the story. So I'm going to dig more into a few that go back up, that have to do with the whole bear thing, all right? That have to do with the ideas of bear and some of the stuff that's already been thrown around by people discussing these ideas. The first thing I'm going to jump to, though, actually took place in Waterville, Maine, back in the late 1800s. I would say October. It was early October of 1886. There was a story that had gone on about, and you and I have discussed this, but some of these, it changes over time. Like, there was a story from 1904 that was posted in the papers up there in Maine about a 7-foot tall, or I'm sorry, rather a 10-foot tall, what they called a wild man. And that they were reports that this wild man was killed, had 7-foot long arms. Its body was covered in hair. So you start digging through that. You really can't find a lot of stuff about this, but you go on there. Like I said, you remember the story that we had done, and this kind of reminds me of it. And this may be like a cross reference to the same story, but you remember the story that we had talked about where the trapper and his buddy, and they decided to work together. And then the trapper claims his buddy got killed by a Sasquatch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is another thing. The same thing. This happened near Moosehead Lake. So there was 3 men going on in this. And this was, we're talking 1886 when all this stuff had gone down. And that, somebody had gone on, and that these guys were out in the woods, and one ended up getting killed by this, what they said was the giant wild man, and that people had gone in and got help, and that a bunch of the men from the town folk there, and the men had all gone out to find it, and that they had killed this 10-foot tall wild man covered in hair. And that after they had killed him and they saw him and they saw that it wasn't a man, that they just left it in the woods. They buried it in like a shallow wash and just covered it with rocks, and that was it. Like, that's the way the story goes. So that little clip, I tell you, that little madness of a clip, because it almost seems like that was the mindset back then. And I don't mean the mindset of shooting it. I mean the mindset of they weren't surprised. Like, as today, if somebody had been accosted in the woods, first of all, you always called the law. You always involve the professionals. You don't just get a bunch of your buddies and grab your guns and just frontier justice charge out into the woods. Although, granted, there's some times that might be deemed necessary. You don't do it. If someone was to kill a 10-foot tall hominid with 7-foot long arms covered in hair, I believe you would be throwing it in the back of your truck and bringing it to town, where you could say, like, look what we found.
Yeah.
Because it's first of all, it's Bigfoot. It's what we've all wanted to see. It's something that we're all into. But back then, this wasn't a thing. This wasn't a thing where there were photographs. This wasn't a thing like, let's bring it in and prop it up. It feels to me like it was something that was almost accepted. It was almost like, yeah, we know they're out there. Now, it could have easily been a bear, or it could have easily just been a guy, and they made up the story that that's what they killed, and it was just some dude. It could have easily been a Native American that they killed, that they wrongfully killed, and they just left out there and covered it up to hide the whole thing, and that was just a story, and that was that. Maybe they didn't kill anything, and it's some dudes got drunk at a bar and told this story. I don't know. But either way you look at it, it seems like nobody was shocked when they came in there, and nobody's like, wait, you killed a 10-foot tall monkey?
Yeah.
Like, what? And I'm also wonder how many people in 1886 knew what a monkey looked like.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean? Like, how many even knew what that was? So I'm like, if you were to tell me that you had killed a 10-foot tall monkey, Philly, and hid it out here, I'd be like, well, get in the truck because we're going to get it. I need to witness this myself. So you jump forward. Mr. Alton Higgins had written a story about Sonoran Sasquatch. Now, this goes back to a German Jesuit, I guess, priest here that actually lived among the Pima Indians, they say here, from 1756 to 1767. And it's Father Pfefferkorn, all right?
Say that again.
Pfefferkorn.
Okay.
Ignaz Pfefferkorn. Now, when I see Father Pfefferkorn, I think of Wendy Peppercorn from The Sandlot. Right? Just like, because it was Squints, he was making out with her, right?
Yeah.
So Father Pfefferkorn was born in 1725. So this tells you how far it goes back. And Alton writes about this. Says that following the expulsion of his order from Spanish dominions, that he had penned a book. And this book was called The Descripción de la Provincia de Sonora. And it was published in German in 1795. Later was translated into Spanish and then into English. The reason I tell you is because some of the reports he gave is what people go back to, that his experiences and his close observation with the people of this native tribe, and that he lived in this area, that he listened to all the different peoples that they came in contact with and the people that lived in the provinces that he was in. And so he also gathered reports and letters from other missionaries out there that he knew. So it, each missionary is almost like was stationed with the Native Americans trying to, whether you like it or not, he was trying to force Christianity on people that didn't need it.
Right.
All right. They were fine without our intervention. Leave that. That's a whole nother can of worms that I have strong opinions against. So anyhow, you have a man that was there witnessing these people, taking their stories, and then listening to other people, right? Mm-hmm. And the others that were involved in this. And so he was viewed as an extremely reliable and credible observer at this time. And there's even historians today that widely cite his writings and his observations. So he is believed to be like the man when it comes to something like this. So here's what's funny is it's not just like, I guess you'd say sociological writers, but they go so far as like wildlife writers talk about the things because he wrote about wildlife as well. So it wasn't like he was talking about just the interactions of the natives and things like that. He talks about a lot of the animals that he's dealing with in this Sonoran areas with these Native Americans. And and Alton goes on to write here. He says that, for example, it's not uncommon to describe several different kinds of bear based on color. And in his discussion of the animals of Sonora, Pfefferkorn wrote this: of the Sonoran bear, some have black hair, others dark gray, and the smallest number are a reddish color. These last are the most cruel and harmful, according to the statements of the herdsmen. Now listen to this, Philly. The herdsmen, who often have the opportunity on the field and in the bush to observe the natural impulses of animals, tell also that the cinnamon bear eagerly go after ants. Hence, the Spaniards in Sonora call the reddish bear oso hormiguero. I'm going to brutalize this. Oso hormiguero, or ant bear. Okay. So that was the idea that they call it an ant bear. So he writes that there's only two species of bear in the province of Sonora during this 18th century. He says the cinnamon bear, they believe, was almost with certainty the grizzly, a species it says that few people realize existed in the southern latitude. So the grizzly were all the way down here. Okay.
Yeah.
So they believe they were down here. Now, of course, Alton talks about that his book has a lot of information on the indigenous tribes members and that how they relate the description of bear and how they may have inadvertently recorded some of the earliest accounts of wood ape interactions with people.
And it says that.
It's that they say that Pfefferkorn did it without realizing what he was doing, as he's accounting these bear accounts because of how they were described. Now, what I mean by that is this, and he says that he's noted this following native report, that he presumed we're talking about grizzly bear activity, as did it says here, the brown and the grizzly in the Southwest. And it says, but this certainly appears to be the case in the very first sentence. This is what Alton was writing. He believes, and many believe, that there's a passage that was a wood ape and not a grizzly bear. And this is what Pfefferkorn wrote. Bear are a special menace to stock raising, for they eat many a calf, and if no smaller prey falls into their clutches, they will attack even horses, cows, and oxen. They delight especially in eating maize as long as it's still tender and soft. Woe to the field if a hungry bear breaks into it at night. He eats as much as he can and makes off with as much as he can, grasp and carry in his mighty arms. In so doing, he ruins even more of the field by breaking it down and treading upon it. The inhabitants of the country assert that a bear defends himself. You ready?
Uh-huh.
Not to mention, now we just said, what was he doing? He's carrying corn in his hands and in his arms and running through a field. Now it says here that the bear defends himself by throwing stones when one attempts to chase him away, and that a stone hurled from his paws comes with much greater force than one thrown from the hand of the strongest man. This seems more remarkable because the bear is supposed to throw the stones backwards. Now, Pfefferkorn had talked about this. Yeah.
What?
Now you're getting what I'm getting. When you read this, you're like, first of all, like we had discussed, bears carry things in their face, not in their hands. If you go off the fact that people have come out now, a lot due to Joe Rogan talking about these bear walking on back legs because they've injured their front paws. Well, yeah, it happens. It does happen. And I'm sure that there's also, you can go online and there's tons of videos of dogs walking on their front legs like they like to kick their back feet up in the air. There's lots of those. I don't see them walking around the streets like that.
Right.
I see it happen, but I don't see it walking around the streets like that. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's probably a lot more dogs that humans interact with than there are bear. Okay? I'm just going to say that.
I would have to agree with you.
Yes. So when you look at this statement that Pfefferkorn had taken down in the 1700s, that a bear destroys the fields as he carries off as much corn as he can in his hands and arms, and if you chase him, he throws a stone. Well, they say throw a stone backwards, probably because a bear would have to kick its feet.
Well, that makes sense, right? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the only way that they could make it throw a stone. But bears don't throw stones. When a bear defends itself, it defends itself with, I don't know, the razor blades on the end of its fingers and the chainsaw and its gums. That's what it defends itself with.
Right, yeah.
A grizzly bear, mind you, doesn't run away from things except other grizzly bears. Why? It's not going to run away from a native. You got a sharp stick? That's cute. Watch this. It's going to fight him. You're going to come running in there. So, Alton even talks about, he said some of these comments may seem a little off, even for a fella as highly educated as him and lived in the bear country for this many years. You would think, well, he's wrong, because he described seeing a grizzly bear while he was there. He even describes in his book, Pfefferkorn does, that his native guide tried to kill the bear. All right?
Yeah.
But that the bear killed him instead. That this native guide shot the bear, couldn't kill it, pursued it, the bear mauls him and kills him. So Pfefferkorn would know, right, what kind of experiences he was having. So you would think it would seem odd to him when people were telling that. And he even talks about here that the same species was capable of walking bipedally so as to carry off large quantities of corn in what Alton writes in quotes, in his mighty arms, and then able to throw rocks more forcefully than the hand of a strongest man. Now, let me ask you this.
Yep.
You've seen dogs kick up dirt,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Do they kick up dirt harder than a man could throw dirt back at a dog?
No.
No. A bear is going to do the same thing. Yeah, he may sling dirt at you, but I'll tell you this. I would let you gas a dirt bike and throw dirt and a rooster tail at me before I would let, I don't know,
Jacob
throw
baseball?
a baseball at me. Yeah, and he's 11 before you throw a baseball at me. So if they're saying that the bear throw it back at you backwards harder than a man can throw it forwards, it's not a bear, my friend. It's got to have, first of all, you've got to have thumbs and you've got to have dexterous fingers in order to grasp a rock.
Yeah. And the fact that he, in his literature, mentions the word wood ape.
Well, he didn't. No. He didn't mention wood ape.
Oh, I thought
Pfefferkorn did not. Alton's the one that talked about that. Yeah.
But even
He's
that guy, it's almost like, because you hear these stories of long ago, the pioneers, these 49ers, these early settlers, they were familiar with these stories of wood ape. There was lots of canyons that were named like Monkey Pass or now they've all been renamed, but the early names on some older early maps, it's almost as if they were aware of it. And which always leads me to, maybe Sasquatch was a real thing. It doesn't exist now.
Yeah.
But maybe like the last one died off in the 60s or even earlier than that.
Well, there is a newspaper clipping out of San Antonio, Texas from 1906. Okay?
Uh-huh.
I'm going to read this. Now, this clipping is hard for me to read. I'm going to do my best to read this to you. And this is what it says. Trap wild man in cave. Hairy savage is caught in his abode after long chase. And it goes on to say this. December 25th, a wild man, such as has not been seen before, has recently been captured in Mexico. A miner who recently arrived from Zitala, a small village in the southern part of the state of San Luis Potosí, tells of the capture alive of a most remarkable creature. The wild man is now detained in Huteca and will be transferred to some museum if his life is preserved. He is about 6 feet tall, vigorous, covered with long hair, and has blue eyes and a ruddy complexion. He eats raw meat and uncooked vegetables, but will not touch cooked food. He has no apparent language, but seems to possess intelligence above that of dumb brutes. Travelers in the remote mountains of El Apolo a month ago saw the wild man and gave chase on horseback. The creature was run to earth in a natural cave in a hillside. He was overpowered only after a fierce fight. There was no furniture in the cave, nor any appearance of there ever having been a fire. Bones and portions of roots and fruits were scattered about the place, which presented the appearance of having been inhabited by the wild man for many months. There was a fragment of calico in the cave, which may have been a part of a garment. The wild man wore no clothing at all, being well covered with shaggy hair. After the people of the valley below were informed of the capture, they related the disappearance of a young woman from the settlement a year ago. Some of the captors thought there might be some connection between the rag found in the cave and the disappearance referred to. Some persons advanced the theory that the wild man is really a human being who has become demented and from long exposure and rough living reverted to animal methods, even to the long hair. No sign can be found of any other specimen of the sort, although there is considerable unexplored territory that might cover a few more of his kind without discovery.
Wow.
So there's always that little statement. Yeah.
Now, seriously, this is a newspaper.
Yes.
What could they be talking about?
I have no idea what you could be. Look, I understand that, they actually had taken pygmies, and they had actually taken people, different tribesmen from Africa years and years ago, and put them in zoos because of their black skin. Because people, they didn't know what they were looking at, right? White man had never seen a black man.
Yeah.
So they had taken them, and that's what they had done years and years ago. This isn't describing that. Why does they say a ruddy complexion?
That's what I'm saying.
Blue eyes.
Blue eyes.
You're like, where is this coming from? What is this? But he's got hair all over his body. Now, here's another one that we would talk about as far as going on down in Mexico. There's a Mexican chronicler from a long time ago, and his name is Fernando Alva. And then if I could tell you his last name, there's a lot of L's, there's a lot of X's, there's some T's and some O's, okay? So I'm not even going to make mention of this whole thing, but he's written a book, and his book was called Obras Historias, and it says it's about a race of hairy giants that lived in the region of what would become Mexico long before the first human settlers arrived. So I guess Quinametzen is kind of the name that it goes by, Quinametzen. And what this whole thing looks like is, it looks like he's writing this book on the giants of what we had in North America. He's writing them on the ones in South America. Because apparently, and I'm trying to find this, and I'm going to have to get this book, and then I'm going to have somebody translate it, because me translate it would be, hopefully there's an English translation for it. If not, it's going to take a while. But somehow he's got these accounts that early settlers coming into this were talking about a very violent and warring tribe of giants that they would have to fight with in this area, and that they said that they were not normal humans, and that the story says that they were eventually extinct, or had driven into the mountains and driven as far away as from where the cities where they wanted to be, because of the people moving in of these wars. Basically the same story as the giants we have in North America. And these Quinametzen, it says what they believed were the oldest accounts of hairy hominids in Mexico, and that there are other legends talked about in that area of other tribes. So like we're going back to what Alton had written about pfeffercorn. There's more people coming further down in Mexico now saying, hey, look, this thing might have, there's stories that go back. Some of them, first of all, they have found figurines that some say are these wild men figurines that are 2,000 years old.
Yeah, see?
So they go back into this, that these stories go back 1,000 years. They're even referred to, and you'll like this, Olmec ape.
Yeah.
They call it the Sisamite. The Sisamite. And that's what they said the Mayan and the Aztec people called them Sisamites. But they were also called the Olmec ape, which we already know the Olmec people in South America were extremely advanced.
Yes.
So maybe they're
the
the
Olmecs
ones
are older than the Aztecs and the Mayans.
Yes, yes.
That's what I'm saying. To us, it seems really bizarre that there would be a creature like that, right?
Yes.
But I'm saying, if you grew up that way, it would just be it would be as odd as you seeing an armadillo when you were hunting. It wouldn't be odd, or jackrabbit. You'd be like,
It's an
from
odd
time
creature.
to time, I see them from time to time.
If I'm glad you brought up armadillo, because if you were to tell somebody about an armadillo that had no pictures, no video, no nothing, you had to describe it to somebody where armadillos didn't exist. You're telling somebody, I don't know, Siberia, about an armadillo, and that it's normal at your place to see them. What are you going to tell them? You see those roly-poly bugs? It weighs about 8 pounds, and it's armored, and it grunts like a pig if you grab it, carries leprosy, and they're real. It's a real thing.
They like to dig holes in the ground.
It's the same story as like a platypus. If you try to describe a platypus, it's impossible to tell somebody that.
Right, so say at a much earlier time that these things were commonplace. Not super common, but from time to time you would see them.
Yes.
And the elders would tell you, you're like, don't mess with them.
Yeah, we know they're out there.
They throw rocks at you. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, that's what makes, that's what I think probably happened.
There are stories, I'm going to tell you this, that this Sisamite that it goes by here, they said they would be spotted roaming jungle regions there all the way down into Central America. Now, this is how they described them, and you're like this. Of course, it is a bipedal ape creature, right? That's what they talk about this thing is. They say it does have a human face. But here's the really odd stuff. They say it has no ears and only 4 fingers with no thumb.
Huh.
So I'm beginning to wonder now as if what they're calling for the no ears, I'm sorry, not the no ears.
Oh.
The head is so big, the ears are small.
Also, being in South America, when I hear the no ears and I hear the 4 fingers, I'm thinking of like a sloth. Because sloths don't really have big stick-out ears, right?
But this is talking about something that walked like an ape, and it had a human face. But when I'm thinking of the 4 fingers and no thumb is their foot, their tracks. Remember the tracks that they found down in Southeast Texas? And if they found, is because they're not normal Bigfoot tracks. You know, they're funnier looking tracks. So maybe that's what it's along on this whole deal too. There's even a claim that the feet on these things point the opposite direction, so they're harder to track. So there is a few things that get a little wacky on that whole deal, right?
Yeah.
You start going like, wait a minute. Also, too, the reports are whenever the Spanish were down in South America looking for gold, okay, that more than once that expedition of men would be attacked by these Sisamites, these giants, and that they would kill some of these guys digging for gold, and that they would end up fighting back and killing one or two of them and then driving them off, which is funny because that's a lot like the story that came from Maine with the French trapper that was trapping and dealing with these things, and it killed his buddy. A lot like the story we covered a long time ago about the man in the woods and all that getting killed by one. Albert Osman getting taken by one. It's funny that these stories go from all the way up north in northern North America to South and central South America. It goes back and forth. But here's one that's even wilder. There was a woman named Lily. And back in 1995, she tells a story that happened to her in 1995. And I believe, I'm trying to think where it was actually, I believe she called in and spoke to, was it Wes? Whoever was it, like Sasquatch Chronicles or something, a while back. I think she called and talked about this, but it's been printed online. You can go check it out on all this stuff. She talks about being in 85 on a camping trip with her family. And during this camping trip, she said that we ended up going camping, and I may have discussed this before because it sounds real familiar, but I can't remember. But she talks about going camping, that they got there late and all that stuff. And she said it was right at sunset, and that when her mom and dad were setting up the camp, that they started hearing what her father said sounded like monkeys, and that they could see them moving through the trees. All right. And that the father was like, look, those are big. And as it got darker, she said they started moving in. They started coming in. And as they came in, they started throwing stuff right at the truck. So they jump, of course, the dad and all them get in the truck, throw the kids just in the back. They got to get out of here. Well, she goes on to tell part of the story that as they're hauling it on out of there, that one of them is chasing them on its knuckles, like it's running on all fours like a gorilla as it's chasing them. So it, I guess, moves faster on all fours than it can running as far as upright. Right. The story said too that it jumped onto the truck. And that's kind of the part that I remember is it's in the back of the truck. And she even remembers telling the story about it holding onto the tailgate. Like she said that she didn't get the feeling like it was trying to, like it wanted to grab her. She said that it felt like it wasn't. It was like trying to just pick her up, like hold her in the hand, grab her and pick her up and look at her. It's what it wasn't trying to snatch her out of the truck as much as it was trying to like hold on to her, which is a weird thing to be like, why is it just trying to hold on to me? But I did like what she started discussing when she talked about its hands. She said its hands were very black-skinned and very leathery. Makes me think of a chimpanzee's hands or a gorilla's hands. Right. But she said that not only that, but the nails were very glossy and thick, which makes me again think about chimpanzee hands when you think about like a monkey's hand. Right. So she starts giving these whole things. Then she even pointed out to her, it looked like the pictures of a gorilla's hands. When you see that
ape-like,
a very, very ape-like thing. And so the story goes on. If the dad started shooting his gun out the back sliding glass, the whole deal, so they could get gone. But she had said that she noticed that some were smaller than others out of the ones that she said were around them, and that they had different color fur. Some of the hair was different colors on the others. Goes back into the bear sightings that Pfefferkorn was talked about that the natives were giving him. Well, not to even stick on that, and you and I discussed this. Back in 2015, there was a mountain rescue guy and a mountain climber down in South America in Mexico named Guillermo Vidal. I think it was Vidales. Anyway, I remember him talking about, because the name sticks with me because I had to look it up, that name. I was trying to find it, but I remember the story going that he was like doing a rescue up by a volcano or a mountain or something that's down in there, and that him and the team, he was multiples, had saw several creatures on the side of the mountain. That they witnessed several creatures.
Yeah.
And they said not only did they see that, when they found the footprints of those creatures, that it looked like that they had almost had like a claw of some sort, because the footprint wasn't right. It wasn't a regular footprint. It's almost like they were like divots in, like the way the feet were digging into the snow, digging into these things. And I remember him talking about the agility. And that's the one thing that set in, is he said that we saw one of the individuals, he said, climb up the glacier that they were glassing in 10 minutes. He said, now, that would have taken, he said, roughly 3 to 4 hours from me and my team to scale. And he said, this thing covered it in 10 minutes up this glacier. Yeah. And he was like, the agility was unbelievable. So all of these tales wrap it up in my mind of what they have seen back then is the same thing that we're seeing now, except now we have a better understanding of how to describe it. Now we have all these different subspecies that, we've talked about with what people here call the wood ape. We got the skunk apes in Florida. We got them in the Pacific Northwest. We got them up in Alaska. We've got them all over. Now they're being seen in, all through Australia with the yowie.
Yeah.
We see all these, but all these ties into the only way that they had them, and like we brought up, they seemed normal. It seemed like a normal discussion. People knew they were out there. They described them as bear.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only way. Like the Native American down there, they described them as bear. That's just like, hey, look, that bear's going to steal your corn. That bear's going to throw rocks at you. Like, look, nobody today reports a grizzly bear's stealing vegetables or throwing rocks.
No, that's always
it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And you've never seen. You can go online right now and watch multiple grizzly documentaries. There's no rock throwing. No. There's no Send me a documentary of a grizzly throwing a rock accurately and far and hard enough to cause any damage. And I don't mean scratching around in the ground, folks. I mean intentionally throwing a rock.
Yeah, I don't think it exists.
So Peppercorn documented this without even realizing what he was doing.
Yeah.
And this continues to go on and go on and go on. And now we just have a better grasp of what was going down. That they've been there this whole time. And yet again, we have no physical evidence of them that we can hang our hat on indefinitely. So it still makes me wonder. What they describe sounds like a physical creature, but sometimes it feels like maybe they've always had the ability to pass back and forth in different planes of existence.
That's exactly right.
I don't know. There's no other way to explain it. So I hope I left you scratching your head, folks. Let's take a quick break. When we get back, we'll wrap this puppy up. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives.
And we're back with Expanded Perspectives. I love the stories, the Sasquatch. I don't know why. They're one of my favorites.
Oh, like I said, man, I can't not talk about them. I can't leave it alone. Like, I've got so many books and so many things.
Well, it's just like the giant stories, right? So there's not very many people nowadays walking around that are considered giants. Yeah, every once in a while you get a Shaquille O'Neal, or what was the giant Chinese fella that played for the Houston Rockets?
Was it Yao Min?
Yeah, Yao Ming.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you get a giant, right? James Wadlow, is that his name? What was the giant?
Is James Waldo?
Not James Waldo. James Wadlow, I believe it was.
James a big guy, but I didn't know he was like that.
Yeah, no, not him.
He's got to bend over real far to get down to those rocks.
But in early America, there was tons of newspaper articles about all these farmers who were plowing up their fields and they would find these giant skeletons, even though lots of people today will say that it's not true.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the time, much of the time, it probably was exaggerated. But there's so many that you can't say that they were all fake, right?
That's true, yeah.
There's thousands of these articles. So much like that, I think that at an earlier time, perhaps Sasquatch was a real living creature here in North America as well as South America. And just over time, it's died out. But it doesn't mean that it never was a real creature.
Yeah.
And maybe we're seeing small amounts of them from time to time. I don't know. But
Maybe
it seems
that's the
awfully
reason.
odd that there's so many cultures talk about this thing if it's all made up. How can they all be making it up?
Exactly. I have a theory. I'll share this with you. I don't know why, because we just talk about all this stuff anyway. It's probably somebody else has already discussed it, already talked about it. They're always talking about, why don't they find a body? Why don't they do it?
That's one of the biggest arguments.
I feel like if it truly was tribes, that there's no solos. Like, if you see one, there's more around. It's like they always talk about copperhead snakes. Like, if you see one, there's at least two around. You just don't see the other one, right?
Yeah.
It often makes me wonder do they hide the bodies of their deceased because of they don't want it to be found because of the past. It's almost like bred into them as to you have to hide the bodies of your deceased. If not, the men in, the city men will find you.
Yeah.
And it will be one of those, it leads more to them.
And I also think that people often forget, they think that every animal that dies leaves a fossil. It has to be a particular set of circumstances to actually even make a fossil.
Yes.
So,
do I need to get Luke? We need to call Luke up and have Luke explain us the
a lot of people just assume that if you die, you're going to find a fossil. Well, if that was the case, you wouldn't be able to walk through the forest because you'd be just tripping over animal bones.
Yeah.
Only certain circumstances create a fossil. So just because you don't find a fossil record of something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
It just means that something didn't get fossilized.
Exactly.
Or it's been fossilized and we just haven't found it yet. I mean, there's a lot of dirt we got to go through. You look how long it takes to exhume a fossil that they find and that they know is there.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's one of those stories that, it's one of the subjects that I will probably always be fascinated with until the day I die will be Bigfoot, no matter what.
I said it often. It's one of those things where I'm super interested in it, but at the same time, I kind of don't want them to ever discover it because if they discover it, then the party's over. Yeah. The mystery's over.
Yeah. I'm torn. Yeah, it's one of those things. I think I like the stories. Like we say, I like the stories and the folklore more than the reality.
Yeah, I think so.
If it was found.
Don't ever meet your hero.
Exactly.
You'll always be let down, right?
That's exactly right. Hey, I got something for everybody. If you haven't already and you're looking for something really interesting to watch on Netflix, make sure you check out Murder Mountain. They haven't paid, they don't give us anything for this. I just tell you, I liked it. I was really interested in it. It's
What's Murder Mountain?
It's about the marijuana farms in Humboldt County in the Pacific Northwest.
I've been to Humboldt County.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it's a very, very disturbing whole thing.
There's the new Ted Bundy thing I want to see on Netflix.
I think I'm starting it this week. I'm going to go ahead and buckle up and give it a whirl and check that whole thing out. But yeah, the whole Ted Bundy thing looks. And have you seen the new movie that's coming out with whichever one of the Efron boys or whatever, one of them boys? It's a Ted Bundy movie.
Oh yeah,
dude, and it looks good. Yeah, it looks real good. I forgot the name of it. It's like I'd have to type. Hold on here while we're talking.
I need to catch up on
pulling it up.
The new season of The Punisher is out. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet.
I've almost finished it.
Is it pretty good?
It's very, very good. All right, the new movie is called. Oh, here we go. I'm not clicking on that link. That's a 17. No. That link I was fixing to click on is from 17 magazine. That wouldn't go over so well. I don't need that in my history. The movie I'm talking about is Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil, and Vile. That's the name of the movie.
That's a long name.
Exactly. And it's already on IMDb. It's got an 8.7, and it says Rotten Tomatoes has got a 63%. And I guess it's being shown right now at the Sundance Film Festival.
I want to see that.
Zac Efron is going to play Ted.
Oh, I want to check that out then. Dude, I want to check out the new documentary with Jimmy Chin and Alex Honnold called Free Solo.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all,
you can get
I'm
on
a big
iTunes
fan of Jimmy Chin, dude. That dude is awesome.
I've been a big fan of his work for a long time just because of all the awesome photography he does for National Geographic.
Yeah, for Nat Geo.
And then he kind of hooked up with Alex Honnold. There was an excellent documentary I saw with Jimmy Chin. If you like Jimmy Chin, it's called Meru, Meru. And it's on, if you have Hulu or Showtime, it's on there. And it's Jimmy Chin and two other guys, and they're like extremely awesome mountain climbers, and he documents the whole thing.
Yeah, Jimmy's a great mountain climber himself.
Absolutely.
And so is his wife. His wife's accomplished at it too. Now they're no Alex Honnold. I mean, there's only one of those. No. Have you seen his fingers? He looks like a damn chameleon or something, the way those finger pads are from him doing that climb.
I think one of the reasons they were documenting this is he's got a pretty serious girlfriend now, and even Alex himself has come forward and said like he's pretty much almost done with doing the free solo stuff. Like,
good.
Yeah. Good. I think he kind of knows that you're really pressing the limits if you keep doing it. No one has ever done it for very long.
No one's ever done it to his level.
And for people that don't know what we're talking about, Alex Honnold is a free solo climber, which basically he's one of those guys that climbs up these mountains without any safety ropes of any kind.
He has a bag of chalk hanging off his hip, and that's El Capitan.
There's only a handful of people in the world that have ever been able to do what he's accomplished.
Well, his latest climb, he's the only person that's ever done.
Yeah, one of the routes. But in a recent interview I saw with him, I think he's fixing to hang it up. Not mountain climbing. He's going to continue. Yeah. But the free solo stuff.
Good.
Yeah. I think he's getting older, and you become wiser. When you're young, you just don't think about it.
You just don't care. And then as you get, it's just like riding bulls. When that poor fella lost his life a few weeks ago riding bulls, it's not if, it's when. And that's the way it is with that mountain climbing. It's not if you fall, it's when you fall.
Speaking of bulls, I'm going to be going to the stock show this Sunday.
Oh, time for a little bull riding.
Lots of people are shocked. They're like, what? You're not going to watch the Super Bowl? And the answer is no. I don't really care about the NFL. I could care less. I definitely don't care about watching New England win another one. Or LA, I don't even care. But I know that you're a big football fan. So are you going to be watching the Super Bowl?
To be honest,
you forgot.
I completely forgot it was even coming up.
I didn't forget. The reason I didn't forget is because I was like, DeLee was trying to schedule a time to go to the stock show. And I was like, well, Super Bowl Sunday's coming up. Why don't we go during Super Bowl Sunday? We'll have the whole midway to ourselves.
There you go. Yeah, there you go.
So that's the reason we were doing it on that day.
And the one I was talking about was Mason Lowe. Mason Lowe got stepped on back a few weeks ago. He's only 25 years old.
It's a rough sport, man.
2,000-pound bull landed on him and killed him.
When's that going to be over with? I mean, like they're already talking about ending football the way we know it with all the CTE and stuff. I mean, riding bulls, there's a lot of CTE in that too.
I don't know that you'll ever stop any of it. You know what I mean? Like even with the whole, I don't know that we'll ever stop any of it. The reason being is it's just an American thing.
It
just is what it is.
Handguns and everything else, right?
Yeah. I mean, and if you go on the PBR store, look, I love to watch bull riding. It's just one of those
things. That's something I like. And you're a big barrel racing fan, aren't you?
Pole bending. And I love the whole idea, the whole thing and all that stuff because, I mean, all jokes aside, Tuff Hedeman doesn't live too far from here. And, you know, we've talked to Tuff multiple times and things like, I mean, it's one of those deals you've seen, I don't know. It's just, when you grow up around it, it's one of those things that you don't ever really get away from. You just kind of, I don't like to tell everybody I watch it. I don't like to, because I'm not about any of the rodeo life anymore. I don't do anything like that. But when I get a chance to watch it, I watch it. I'm a big fan of Rob Smets. And Rob Smets was a professional bullfighter. And probably one of the greatest ever that ever lived.
My favorite as a kid was always where they would have the guys sit down and they're playing poker and then they would let the bull come out and who could sit there the longest. I used to love that as a kid.
Yeah.
What is it about people that want to see other people get injured?
I don't know. But as I've gotten older, I can't watch that.
I know, but when I was a kid, I loved it, right?
I loved it. Because I would laugh. I'd be like, you're so stupid. That's what you get. You're so stupid. Yeah.
Well, let's get out of here. If you have any stories of your own you would like to share with me and Cam, you can email us at expandedperspectives@yahoo.com or you can call the show 817-945-3828. Don't forget about Expanded Perspectives Elite. If you like this show, you're only listening to half of it. Unless you're an Elite member, we do an additional show every week, most of the time. If not, you get additional shows every month. And signing up is easy. You just go to the website. It's $5 a month, and you'll have access to all the new shows as well as the entire back catalog. So it's probably one of the best deals going around on the internet. I hope everybody out there has a great week. Be safe. Till next time, I'm Kyle Filson. He's Cam Hale.
Peace, y'all.